Right, good night. Sorry, not good night. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm ahead of myself. Apologies for that. It's Tuesday, the 26th of March. I'm Councillor Claire Douglas, and this is the meeting of Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee. And I'd like to welcome you this afternoon. So going straight to the agenda, we have apologies from Councillor Eyre and Councillor Widdowson, and we have Councillor Healy and Councillor Waller substituting for them. So welcome to the meeting. Thanks for attending this afternoon. Declarations of interest is the first official item on the agenda. Can I see if anybody has any declarations of interest? No, there are none. The second item is exclusion of press and public, and this is to consider this exclusion of press and public from the meeting during consideration of the following: the confidential annex to agenda item 5, proposed new chief officer structure, on the grounds that it contains information relating to individuals and the financial affairs of particular persons. And this information is classed as exempt under paragraphs 1, 2 and 3 of Schedule 12A to Section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, as revised by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. And what I propose is that this report is introduced in public and discussed as much as possible in public, and then we move into private session once we are asked to consider in more detail the private aspects of the agenda item. So can I see those who are in favour of that, please? Councillor Waller.
I've just asked for clarification. We're being asked to consider exclusion of the public on the confidential annex. Councillor Healy and I have not seen this confidential annex, so we can't judge whether it does fall into that or doesn't. It may do. You've seen it. You believe it does?
I haven't seen it either. None of us have seen it. That was the arrangement that was communicated to you, but because of the nature of the papers, that nobody would see the confidential papers until the meeting, and we will be given adequate time to review them.
That also covers that there isn't the Local Government Association peer review report coming tonight.
No. Ian, would you like to cover that?
Yeah, I mean, on the confidentiality, it's officer advice, so it does amount to being confidential. Clearly, when we get to that point, you can further consider the matter. On the peer review, I'll deal with that when we get to the item and pick that up when we actually come to the item.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, and Chair, just to clarify the point that you raised about considering items in public and then going into private session, just getting that clarification when you are anticipating we would go into private session.
As soon as we need to speak about any personal information or any financial information that is included in the annex. So whatever's in the public papers we can discuss in public, and I really would recommend that. And then we will stop the webcast and move into a private conversation so that we can all consider the annex in the most appropriate way.
Okay.
Yes, Councillor Healy.
So are we going to be given the confidential annex and the peer review?
No, you're not getting the peer review because it's not out, so it hasn't actually been completed, so there's no document to give to you. So I will deal with that when we actually get to that item, the sense of consideration of a peer review, what it means, what it doesn't mean, and I'll deal with it when we get to the agenda item.
Okay, because it's a reference document in a paper that you're not giving us
No, it's not classed as a background document, and I believe that advice has been provided to you.
Has it?
I believe some of the advice has gone, but I can tell you now, it's not a background paper. That is a document which is in existence. Again, we're getting onto questions now, which I'm going to deal with as part of the agenda item.
Can I suggest therefore that we move through the agenda, and then all questions that need to be asked can be at the appropriate agenda item, and I'm sure officers will answer anything that you have at that point in time. Is that okay with everybody? So can I ask again about the exclusion of press and public? Once we decide collectively that we want to discuss anything that falls into the confidential annex to agenda item 5, that we move into private session, given the advice that we've had from the Chief Operating Officer that does contain confidential information that we need to treat appropriately.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, okay, so in that case, then we're all in agreement that we'll move into private session at the appropriate time when we're instructed we're starting to consider confidential information. Item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 22nd of January. Can I see people are happy to? Yes, me and you were here, weren't we? So yeah, it's a fair reflection of the meeting. So I'm happy to recommend those for approval. Can I see those in favour? Yeah, thank you. Thanks very much. So those are approved. Item number 4 is public participation. We have no public speakers registered today, so we will move on to the next item, which is item number 5, the proposed new chief officer structure, which can be found on pages 9 to 34 of your agenda. So Claire and Ian, would you like to present that to us, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll start and take you through just some of the highlights of Newport, and then obviously Claire can add anything further. Recall the meeting in January, 22nd of January, we set out an initial draft proposal that set out a 2-stage process in terms of the senior management review. Stage 1 would deal with the direct reports to myself, and then stage 2, which would follow and is referred to in the original report, would look at other aspects of senior management across the organisation. That report did set out that clearly, given the financial challenges, we need to be looking to achieve some savings. We also talked in that report about looking to, where possible, reduce the layers within the organisation as well, and particularly managerial layers, and also try and bring, where we can, greater accountability over certain functions. Some of the other issues that were referred to in terms of some of the proposals were around bringing all the financial activity under one director of finance, looking to join up housing and communities, and very much also to look at how we exploit some of the opportunities associated with the combined authority. Clearly, that was just the start of the process. We have done extensive consultation since with both the directors in the council, but also heads of service, and it's been widely pushed out in terms of to all of our staff in terms of the fact that this is happening. It has featured in the emails that go out from myself to all staff as well. So there's been extensive consultation. Just to give you sort of some of the feedback in terms of some of those, some of that consultation. The positives which I highlight, so people generally supported the fact that there's no proposed changes within children's, adults and public health. Members be aware those areas are, critical and are clearly under extreme pressure at the moment, and so people have broadly welcomed the fact that actually we're not proposing to change those areas, and clearly they are all statutory roles. The changes in the Director of Finance have been supported in terms of creating that role, and clearly given the financial challenges we've got, having a stronger role there is felt to be beneficial, and the bringing together of communities and housing. People do recognise, I think, that savings have to be achieved. We know that has to be done, but it has to be done right. And clearly, if you go too far, there are potential dangers in terms of doing that. I think the biggest issue which emerged during the consultation was really around where the council finds itself at this point in time, with many big projects, York Central in particular, and also with the local plan, not just in terms of getting the local plan approved, but actually how you then exploit it. And of course, the combined authority, which is new, and how do we, where resources are stretched, but still actually make sure we've got capacity to drive forward the development of the city and make advantage of the combined authority, because we have to be active on that front. Merely standing back and just saying, well, it's a combined authority, we would potentially lose out. So we have to be active, we have to be promoting things. And that was probably the biggest area in terms of actually ensuring there's capacity to drive forward all of that major development activity. And sometimes, clearly, if you are so bogged down in the operational aspects of things, finding the time, the space, the strategic leadership for some of that could have been difficult. There were some sort of more minor comments around where public protection, community safety, emergency planning sat. So we've made amendments to that as well. So the main change from the original proposals is that instead of having a single director for transport, environment and development, is to have two directors, one for transport and environment and one for city development. And that's felt to provide that split between the operational and the more strategic development activity. There is one area which I just need to highlight, which members may wish to consider, where there has definitely been two views. And when you do restructures, often there are a range of views. There's often no right or wrong. But in respect of planning is a particular consideration where I think I just need to raise that with members who need to take a view, I think. So we have had views which sort of recommend that it should effectively sit with transport and environment in terms of it being an operational regulatory activity. Equally, we have had views that planning should sit within the Director of City Development. It's currently shown in the Director of City Development, but it could equally move to the Director of Transport and Environment. And I just raised that because it was something where there was a balance of views. And I think it's, in essence, for members probably to take a view in terms of that issue. So the report then takes you through the very specific proposals in terms of Director of Finance, some of the movements which were explained in the previous report, which some things move, for example, asset management, business support, ICT, and then explains the three director roles in the place and communities. So the Director of Transport and Environment, Director of City Development, and the Director of Housing and Community Services. The sort of impact of all of those, as I say, we set it out in the first report, but we repeat some of it here. And just to stress it again, it very much is around reducing some management layers, creating a Director of Finance role with all the financial activity coming together, creating that strategic capacity for city development, including in particular York Central and the combined authority, integrating housing communities and also achieving some savings. The financial implications set out, so you'll see it's 165,000. That is before consideration of any costs in terms of redundancies, which clearly we can talk about more if you wish to go into private session on that. I think I'll stop at that point. I don't know if Claire wants to add anything at this stage.
Claire, would you like to add anything at all? No, okay. Okay, Ian, can I just ask you, therefore, please, to talk about the LGA reports that have informed this work and how? Thank you.
Yeah, so we've had, I'd say, two pieces of work. One was a sort of fairly informal discussion we had a few months ago, which was around looking at a sort of decision-making model, which the LGA have, and they've done this in other areas, and they just looked at some of our structures, and one of the things they talked about, you know, it was predominantly in conversations that we had with them, was around the layers that you have in an organisation from top to bottom, and very much with a view that, you know, their view was you should be seeking to aim for about 6 in a local authority. So we've done a bit of preliminary work, and that will feature particularly when we go into stage 2 of the restructure, where we are looking at grades 12, 13 and AD. So you've got 3 tiers there to look at. And so one of the things which is in the first report does talk about that aspect of looking. So you start at top layer in terms of myself, you then have a director, and you have effectively a senior manager. And it's looking at, we need to look carefully at those layers. In some areas, we've got more than 6. You know, we've definitely got more than 6. In some areas, we've actually got less than 6. So it's looking, and clearly, if you've got, you know, 8 or 9 steps from the bottom to the top, you probably need to ask yourself why and challenge that. Each area will be slightly different, clearly, but part of the particularly next stage, we'll be looking at that. This stage, we've obviously looked and have sought where we can to reduce the layers as well. And so the proposals do achieve some reduction in that. The other reports, obviously, is the peer review report, which I say is not complete, it is in draft. I think it's important to stress that, you know, ultimately what that report says, unless it is changed dramatically, is not specific to the structure of the council. What any peer review is about is really about more broad strategic issues in terms of how you work, the culture and the organisation, the relationships, how you deliver in the council plan. So the peer review, I think, just to stress, is not the be all and end all of any restructure that you choose to do. What I have done, because obviously I have seen the draft, and particularly the draft recommendations, is to do a check in terms of, is where we're going broadly, you know, in line with what they are saying. And I'm content that it is. I think in terms of this stage, go remember, we're just talking about the top tier. So it's not, we're not doing the whole council. There are a couple of things which I think, you know, I say the report is not out, but there are a couple of things I think I can talk about, which the peer review will talk about. One is, as you might expect, a significant emphasis in terms of financial strategy and the financial position of the council. And that proposal to create the director of finance, I think, is very much, you know, in line with where we want to be to get a higher profile for that role. The other thing they talk about, I don't think, you know, comes as a surprise, is how do you exploit the opportunities of the combined authority and some of your major developments? How do you, you know, really maximise economic development of the city, work with partners in terms of achieving that, and attract further inward investment? And that again chimes with creating the director of development role. There is clearly then, when we come on to stage 2 and the peer review does come out, we will have further opportunity to look at some aspects of what the peer review is saying. How do we structure services and the heads of service and work with things? And what areas might we actually need to find some capacity as well, but that can be done at stage 2. So I'm content we have considered the sort of draft peer review proposals as part of this, and then any further actions we do need to do can be taken forward as part of stage 2 when we go into that more detailed aspect.
Thank you, Ian. And can I just ask, you've mentioned stage 2 a couple of times. Can you talk about the timing of that? Because obviously this is an uncertain time for staff, and it just would be helpful for everybody to understand that in a bit more detail. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, we appreciate restructures are not great, are they? And, you know, people want to, you know, engage in it, deal with it, but then to move on from that. We clearly will be subject to decisions tonight. We'll be moving forward in terms of this stage. We will very early be communicating with what I call the grades 12, 13 AD, the senior manager cohort. We'll communicate with them, and there will then be a process of, clearly like any review, where we consult, we discuss, we engage with people. So that will take some time to do some of that. There are 1 or 2 bits which we might need to pick up early in terms of, because of the impact that these changes have, where there's 1 or 2 posts we might just need to address fairly early. But in terms of a wider sort of level, we will be taking our time. We want to hear from people, hear from the heads of service, hear from people in terms of what the options are, fully, clearly consider the peer review. And so that period of time will probably, you know, we'll just need to think about, because doing it all as one is a big ask. There may be bits where we can do it quicker. There may be bits we need to spend a lot of time doing, but certainly we won't be rushing that, in the sense we want to do it right. And where we need to very much engage with staff to think about their views. But as I say, there may be some bits we can do quicker, but some other bits where we absolutely need to take significant time.
Thank you. And just for my interest as well, it seems to me that in stage 2, it'd be good that for whatever decision we make tonight, if there are changes to responsibilities and service areas, that the directors are given an opportunity to get to know their service before stage 2 is initiated. Is that the case?
Yeah, the directors, I mean, clearly a number of the directors are keeping what they've got. So there's just a few who have got, to say, new services. And so, yeah, that would be a consideration, I think, in terms of, clearly the directors themselves will have to be very much driving this process forward. So they will need to understand it. Now, in some cases, clearly they already understand it. In some other areas, they will be getting new services. So I think those are some of the ones where it probably will take longer to just think about it, see what the opportunities are, consult with the staff, and clearly we will absolutely seek to make sure there is proper consideration. The worst thing would be to rush it, I think.
Thank you. Thanks. Can I open it up to anybody else for any further questions at this point then, please? Councillor Kilbane.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, Ian, and thanks for another report on the restructure. And it's great that we've been through that process. We listened at the meeting back in January, and then we've listened to staff, and clearly the report that comes before us now has changed as a result of that, which is, you know, I think is always healthy. In terms of the planning role of the Director of Housing and Community Services, so I would imagine that the job of the Director of Housing and Community Services, I beg your pardon, the Director of City Development, the planning role within City Development. The job of the Director of City Development would be to go out there and encourage investment in, you know, building in the city, be like York Central, or, you know, attracting new businesses to come and build in the city, or social housing, or you know, whatever it is. Given that they will be advocates for that, you know, trying to make that happen in the city, is there any conflict with them actually being in charge of planning as well? Because obviously the planning authority is quasi-independent from the from the local authority, and if the same person's in charge of both, of trying to encourage people to build, but then also in charge of planning, is there any sort of dilemma there?
There certainly is a potential dilemma or a potential for it to be viewed as an issue. You can put in place some safeguarding in terms of, because actually we have that in place now. So sometimes in terms of major projects, you can end up with a situation whereby the head of planning ends up almost where I'm her line report, because it takes her out of any other thing. But there certainly is that potential. And that was one of the views that was given to us in terms of the fact that whilst you can mitigate it and do things, actually, why do that? Why not just actually remove the potential completely? So that was one of the views in terms of why planning should maybe sit with environment, transport, and environment transport, as you appreciate, also have quite significant regulatory aspects which link to the planning process. So those services being together has merit.
Anybody else want to ask any questions at all? Councillor Healy?
I did ask Reese yesterday, because we only knew about this yesterday, and we had to offer our services to come along. If I could have the new job descriptions, the old job descriptions, and the change, because I can't track through here where various bits are moving to. And then also what isn't in here is the complexity of those bits. So, for instance, and you can clarify this because my information is hazy and out of date, is business rates is, you know, a function, but I believe it's like 1 or 2 people. And council tax, I don't know how many people are council tax. So adding those 2 functions elevates an AD to a D. So that seems like quite a small additional responsibility to go up. And then to, well, okay, then please explain why I'm wrong.
Okay. So all the changes are either set out in the first report or actually set out in this report. So if you look at the Director of Finance one, the changes in terms of the Director of Finance one were set out in the original report. So if you refer to that, but we have repeated them. So if I look at here on page 13, so it says proposal 1, create a Director of Finance. So that replaces the Chief Finance Officer role. That role covers all the existing functions that a Chief Finance Officer has. But in addition, you'll see there that there's 3 bullet points to that. So you add into that all the customer services finance, which is council tax, business rates. Now that is, it's page 13.
Page 13 or
Yeah.
point 14.
Page 13, proposal 1.
Paragraph 17 and 18.
So that sets them out. So you've got customer services, which you referred to. No, this is the current report. Yeah, but it is in the original report as well, because nothing's changed.
Difference between the PDF that was sent to people attending this meeting and looking at the online
So it's-
report.
Okay, so it's paragraph 17 and 18 of this report.
Of the online.
Should be the same, I would have thought.
Because 17 says this will replace the existing chief.
Yeah,
finance officer.
yeah.
So,
So go to page paragraph
and
18.
then 18 is
So I'll talk you through that. Paragraph 18, customer services, finance does move. Council tax is a significant activity with a number of staff. You are talking about the collection of, I need to check that, but you're getting into detail, which isn't really for this committee to discuss, but I can talk about the details. So you've got £90 million of income collection on council tax, and you've certainly got a lot of income collection business rates, lots of activity going on in terms of within the council tax team, in terms of dealing with issues day in, day out. I will just say the team do a fantastic job whilst I'm talking about them. So you've got that moving. You've also got asset management. So you've got asset management, and within that is the FM and all our buildings as well. So that's quite a significant addition. And you've got business intelligence going into there. So that makes a bigger role. And clearly, you know, our view, and we have Claire can talk more about the school, but certainly in respect of that one, it clearly is a director of finance role. And given the financial pressures or challenges that exist in the council, it clearly, in my view, should be there, and is one of the fundamental proposals as part of this report.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Healy, can I just ask you to come through the chair, please, and not jump in, because it's really, yeah, no, you're chittering away under your breath there, and it's really difficult to run a meeting when I've got some noise going on in my ear at the same time. You'll get your time to speak, but please just do it through me. So would you like to speak again for a follow-up question?
It's not follow-up. If that is the case, you need to refer to what you're talking about, because there's probably 3 sets of papers here that I'm all trying to refer back to. So you need to say what point you're at.
Councillor Healy, I think that the papers are very clear. There's the original paper in here. There's the paper for today, and Ian has outlined what he's been talking about. I suggest perhaps it might have taken a bit longer to read them, and for you to study, because, you know, these changes are never straightforward, are they? But I feel as though the papers are clearly laid out. They contain all the information that we require. You have the opportunity to ask questions of them. I don't really see what the problem is in that respect.
I have read the papers. All I'm asking for is when people ask a question and you give an answer that refers to a section of the paper, you just say which section of the paper. If I ask a question, it's normally I'm referring to section 18 to give an opportunity for you to read what section I'm going to ask the question on. Now, that's fairly standard. That doesn't seem...
That's absolutely fine. But Ian did say it was on page 13. So I think he did that. And I think we need to focus on the detail and the information that's in front of us, rather than how somebody approaches pointing you to the point in the paper. Right, anybody else would like to ask a question? Councillor Waller.
Thank you, Chair. In relation to paragraph 28, there's reference to the charge to HRA stroke capital. How much is coming from the HRA as distinct from general capital?
I don't know that answer. We'd have to get that back to you. The what I will say is clearly these figures have been through the finance team. There already is, as you probably work out, there already are charges to HR and capital from senior management. You can only charge to the HRA those costs which are attributed to that HRA, and similarly to capital. I can provide the breakdown, but I just haven't got it.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
I can follow up with that, because in your preface slide, you talked about public protection and a number of other responsibilities, and it's not easy to track where all of these are going across all of the posts. There's a finite number of responsibilities, and we have been here before when we went through the blueprints from 2008 in terms of the breadth of responsibilities and attributing those to specific posts. So it's understanding that some things are moving from one post to another. It's how that's reflected in the overall savings programme, which is paragraph 28 as well. So it's about the total costs and how that's reflected in responsibilities.
I'm not sure I quite follow what you're saying, but in terms of which services are moving, I think we do explain every service that is potentially moving. In particular, if you look at the areas you just talked about, in paragraph 21, we do highlight that the Director, Transport and Environment, where we say at the last sentence, a further amendment is to bring public protection, community safety, emergency plan under this role. In addition, at the very end of the paper is clearly the annex with the proposed structure, which does show you for the areas that have changed, not for things like children's and adults, but it does show you the functions that sit under there. In terms of the savings, we can only report on what the staff savings are in terms of these proposals. Any other, there are no other related costs or savings at this point in time that we are aware of.
Thank you, Ian. Anybody else for any other questions at all at this point? Councillor Healy?
Yeah, thank you. Right. Thank you, Chair. Where was it? Here we go. Page 14.3, Director of Housing and Community Services, second line. We will also take on responsibility for housing subject to a further review in terms of whether any aspect should move to adult services or whether a modified governance model is required. With adult social services would have a shared responsibility for certain aspects of housing. A very similar sentence is in the 2020 reorganisation. Why has it still not happened?
I'm impressed that you've gone back to 2020's report. In terms of what hasn't happened, there already is close working between adults and housing. What this is just talking about is the need to just keep that under review. And we now have a new Director of Adult Services. Clearly, the world is always changing in terms of services and the services we deliver. Therefore, it's just opportune that actually, given their close relationship between housing and adult social care, we're just saying it needs to be reviewed in the light of this restructure and to see whether there's anything that we need to do further.
Thank you. Councillor Healy?
Yeah. So my understanding is there's two sort of aspects of housing. There's, physical maintenance and upkeep within the broad housing portfolio. And then there's the more sort of allocation of housing. So in as part of this, does the sort of more allocating of housing go to the Director of Housing and Community Services? Where does the physical because I'd imagine they're quite different skill sets.
They all will go to the Director of Housing and Community Services. So they all currently sit under one director. They will all move to one director. Housing is very multifaceted in terms of a whole range of issues, because yes, you have got the areas you talk about, but you've got some of the more supported nature of housing, which clearly links into adult social care. And then you've got a lot of community work that they relate to. And all we're saying is we need to review that. So we're moving all housing into those areas. At the minute, you have two heads of housing who currently do slightly different areas. You also have housing delivery activity as well. So it's complex. And whilst in principle, I still envisage that the vast majority of housing will sit under that director,
Yeah.
because you need one director who's fundamentally responsible for it. It is just that there are aspects and strong relationships with adult services. And given the fact we've now got a new director of adult services, the opportunity there is to review how that might work, and also link any of that into actually the council plan as well, in terms of some of the priorities that the current administration have got and how best we do that. But this isn't going into that detail. This is doing what's your basic structure, chief officer level. And yes, yeah, there will be lots more things to think about and lots more detail to think about, which we'll do at stage 2 and with just other considerations as well.
Thank you, Ian.
Question.
Yes, go ahead, please.
I have quite a lot, so I don't want you to.
Okay, keep
good.
going.
So what's my next one? Oh, the reason I went back to 2020 is at that time you did provide probably the work that you did. I'm guessing the job descriptions possibly old and new. So it was the point that Councillor Waller's made and I've made. It was much easier, even though it was across multiple reports, and it would be much better if it was in a table to try and work out what went where to where. Now I understand that turned into too much detail today, but that's what I asked Louise for this, because you had provided it previously in 2020. And I'll reiterate again, it's very difficult from a series of paragraphs to try and work out which bits move from A to B. Now, perhaps I'm just more used to seeing things in tables and spreadsheets than in a big long paragraph and trying to match things across. So that's more of a statement than a question. So within place, I'm guessing there's quite a lot of employees in place currently.
Is that a
That's a
question or
question.
a statement?
No, that's a question.
Yes.
Do you happen to know how many?
It's probably about 400, is it? Something like that.
Yeah, in terms of numbers, and I'm guessing where the question is going to be going around how people are moving and the numbers of people attached to each directorate, there'll be a significant number in place for sure. But in the bearing in terms of the size of the roles, it doesn't have the bearing that you might think it does in terms of the movement of staff around the system. It's more about the breadth of the roles.
Okay. Can I continue?
Yeah, can I ask you how long you think this is going to go on? How many questions have you got?
That many?
And how many have you done?
3 or 4.
Do you think that you could perhaps group them together then so that we can make some progress through this? Because otherwise we could be here quite a long time, couldn't we? Thank you.
Sorry, Chair. Okay. So going back to place currently, I'm guessing it does have quite a lot of staff, and quite a lot of them are not the highest grades, I think is probably the correct term to use. So does it have more than those 6 layers?
I mean, we're starting to stray into detail, which isn't really for this committee, but I can answer it. There are areas of place where they do have more than 6 layers, but that's not something you've been asked to consider or discuss.
No, yeah, and can I just remind everybody that we're here to talk about the senior management reorganisation and structure, not stage 2. So can you focus your questions onto relevant information to do with the proposed structure that's in front of you that we're making a decision on today, because the stage 2 is for another day and we will come back to that. It's not within the remit of this report. Thank you. Yeah, can you, as I said, can you bunch some questions together so that we can move through this, please? Thank you.
One of the previous LGA reviews stated that you had too many direct reports, and I believe it was 8. This review increases it to 9. It's why have you ignored that advice?
I'm not aware of the previous advice, and I'm not doubting it exists, I'm just not aware of it. If you want to reduce layers, it's inevitable that you almost you need to have a number of reports.
Become broader.
You could, I mean, one of the things I would say with any restructure, in a way, there's no right or wrong in terms of how you do that. But if you reduce the number of reports to me, for example, let's say you went to 3, those 3 would become executive directors. You would then have directors reporting to those probably, and it wouldn't reduce the layers. So we're trying to reduce the layers. As you said, there's 8 already, going to 9 doesn't make a huge difference, and actually all the statutory officers need to have direct lines of sight to myself anyway. So that the amount and the scope you've got, unless you went to just called executive or strategic directors, which in my view would actually increase numbers of layers rather than reduce them.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps we'll have a slight break from you, Councillor Healy, and allow Councillor Kilbane to come in.
No, thanks, Chair. But I actually am quite enjoying Councillor Healy's question. I think it's quite interesting. I think it does show a level of understanding, really, that this is also about saving. So even though we've got sort of 9 on a layer, is the idea that we reduce the number of layers so that the council is more flexible, more reactive, that people who are on the front line have got shorter chains of command, if you like, to get there. And actually we can do that while increasing the number in a particular layer. We're still making a saving in spite of that. Is that the case?
Yeah, that's right. And so in terms of this layer, you're just talking the top layer. So you've got myself, and then obviously the next layer we're talking about. The intent is then to go as part of stage 2, which in reality will be a much bigger review. And I think the first report made it clear that stage 2 we'd still be looking to achieve savings, but that it shouldn't be a rush, if you like, to the bottom in terms of just taking £1 million out for the sake of it. It should be done in a proper, coherent way, which makes the council both achieve some savings, because we have to do that, reduces the number of layers, but actually reviews some of the areas where actually we may need to actually invest some additional resource in.
Thank you. Councillor Healy, do you want to ask another? Can you bunch another couple of questions together, please?
I certainly can
Thank
try.
you.
So you're looking at the directorate layer, and some of the and it's focused on place, and responsibilities have been shuffled. So you're going from 1 corporate director and 3 directors to 3 directors. Yep, fine. And you've not looked at adults, children, and public health. When was that decision made?
You're making the decision here, in terms of, so, well.
When was the decision to exclude those areas?
Well, I'd take that decision in terms of, it's myself to bring a report to you, brought that report in January. So that report has been known since January in terms of the draft proposals. I set out in that original report, and it's attached as an annex here, I set out the fact that as an organisation, we need to find savings, we need to downsize. We equally have statutory roles we need to fill and have to have. So we have to have a director of children's services. We have to have a director of adult services. We have to have a director of public health. And in the original report, I talked about the need to maintain those and retain them. Those areas are not all exempt from stage 2. So all I'm talking about is that stage 1, I have taken a decision that I'm not going to change. Well, I've taken a decision and I presented to you both January and here. It would always be for members to have said to me, we don't like what you're saying, Ian, can you do something else? Ultimately, it's members who make the decision in terms of senior structure. So I've brought to you a proposal, which is to leave those 3 roles unaffected. Very much in part, because actually it's not that long ago since we did make some changes in those areas, and they are statutory. You are limited as to what you can do in the place area. And, you know, and I apply the statute to the monitoring officer and the finance role as well. In place, they're not statutory roles. So actually you have potentially got more opportunity in terms of what you do in those areas and how you structure it. And so that is why we've looked at that area in terms of that. But just to stress, all of the senior management, other than the ones we're talking about here, will be part of stage 2 and will be considered appropriately.
Thank you, Ian. Councillor Lomas?
Just a couple of things. We keep referring to it's only place we're looking at here, but it's not only place, it's also communities, and so we shouldn't forget that. And you know, it is not a focus solely on place, it is a focus on the place and communities. But my recollection is that we previously tried a different structure with regards to the Director for Adults and Director for Children's Services, and it was undone because it was unworkable. Can you just outline that for us?
Yeah, we did try a Director of People Services, and, you know, there are potential merits in that. You bring it all together. There are probably 2 aspects in terms of where it probably didn't work. One is it's too big a role. In reality, it's too big. And ultimately, you know, in that one person, you've got the best part of 75–80% of the spend of the council. And also you end up actually probably having extra layers as well as part of that. The other thing is what happened was we struggled to recruit. So we did actually go out to replace that role. And actually we got very little interest, and the feedback given was that the number of people who actually want to be directors of people dealing with both is few and far between, and the salary we were offering at that level would have needed to be probably about 25–30,000 more than what we were offering. If you look across the areas where they do have that role, they are paying significant sums of money for that role, and then they still have a Director of Children's Services and Director of Adult Services underneath that. So we reverted back to where we're at, and in my view, in terms of children's, it's operating very well. We've seen really good improvements. No reason to change that. We've just obviously appointed a Public Health Director, and clearly public health is a really important priority for your administration. The fact that that role reports direct to myself was actually a strong thing in terms of the feedback we got when we had to advert on public health. And we had a really strong field, and clearly, you know, Peter Roderick got that job, but it was a strong field, and I think having it on the management team and where it reported, and clearly adults is a pressure and a difficult area, but equally, you know, it's one where we think we can make progress, and having a clear defined Director of Adult Services. I think on the point you raised about it's not just place, absolutely, and there are functions that used to be in place which are moving across. Those are explained, things like asset management, and clearly in the customer and communities area, there are things which currently sit there which are equally moving across to either to HR or to finance. So there are things moving. I could be corrected, but I believe both in the first report and the second report, we explain every single service that is moving. And as I say, the appendix at the end shows you where those functions sit.
Thank you. Councillor Healy.
You mentioned the monitoring officer. My understanding is that role was added quite a lot of functions 4-ish years ago. And then quite a lot were taken off. So civics come off. I believe that was in charge of climate change at one point. So as well as looking ups, have you looked at downs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the monitoring officer role, in terms of, if I go back to sort of 2019, around then when that director of governance role was created, so it's 2009 it's created, and end of 2009, I know when that was because it was just before COVID and the individual appointed had just a few weeks here before COVID. We advertised that job as a director of governance, so end of 2019, and the role was predominantly virtually the same role as you've got, which is in this document, which effectively is a pure director of governance dealing with legal and democratic in elections. So 2019, it was a director role. When we did the restructure, which was probably 2021, we added into that role the aspects of policy and strategy were added into it. We are now taking those bits out, but the role is still the role that it was in 2019 when it was advertised and appointed as a director role, and at the time was assessed and graded as a director role. So nothing has changed other than the fact that for a period of time we added something in and then we've taken it out. But it's, as you look at it now, it is 99% the same role that went out to advert in 2019.
So when stuff was added in, the role wasn't regraded then?
No, it wasn't sufficient to make it go higher.
Claire?
Thank you. Just to make it clear around what's the terminology about regrading and evaluated. So the role will have been evaluated. It may not have changed grade. It's an important difference just to know.
Okay.
Yeah, because
Evaluated and regraded. No?
all roles are evaluated. They're
Yeah.
assigned a grade. It doesn't necessarily mean that role is attributes a different grade. So it will have been evaluated at that time when services may have come out or go back in again. The grade remain the same.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you. Right, can we wrap up then, please, councillor Healy,
Oh, okay.
on this section, please?
Oh. Point 30, page 16, it mentions a redundancy budget. That's a term that we've not heard of before. Can you just give some background on what it is?
I can, we're straining to points of detail, but there's a budget which is held by finance where they will pick up where they can the aspects. So each and every year they'll have some redundancies, some pension strain. So there's budgets which are there, which are current, some existing pension strain costs. Each year, some of that drops out and then is often replaced by others. So there's a budget that's finance control.
Thank you.
Can I ask a supplementary on that, please?
Are we getting to the end of your list?
There's a whole section that I won't ask until the private part.
Can you hurry up
So
then,
I've
please?
got one
Can you carry on?
point. But so that's a notional pot then. It's not like earmarked reserves. It's something happens that generates a pressure or a cost, and you add money to it. It's not like, I don't know, the earmarked reserves for maintenance of this building, it's got £1 million sitting in it. Or is it?
Without going into the basics of accounting, it's a budget there to meet costs that we incur.
Okay.
Okay, right.
Yep.
Can I suggest then that we move into the next stage of the meeting and go into consider Appendix 5 as outlined in private session? So are we happy to move to that stage now, everybody? Yes.
just A, I presume we're going to be offered separate rooms to read this, and B, why do we have to give out over our mobile phones? As I don't understand.
Sorry, I can't hear you, councillor Healy. Can you speak a bit more clearly, please?
One, I presume we're going to be given separate spaces to discuss this and read it. And B, why do we have to hand over our mobile phones?
Why
And
do we have to do what with mobile phones?
why do we have to hand over our mobile phones? Because I've never
told
heard
you
of
that?
that before.
You told you to hand over your mobile phone.
I've not, that's not something that we
Hmm,
have
we're
discussed. Or...
misinformed. Okay, but we will
Actually,
need
that's quite
separate
serious.
spaces.
Can you inform you of that?
No, you can't go out the room with the confidential document that needs to be in this room. It's not that long, so without disclosing, I don't think it'll take you that long, and we're happy to take you through what it says.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
So can I
sorry.
suggest a process then? And then you can, you know, if you agree with this, then we can move forward with it. So if we go into private session in order to be able to consider the confidential appendix that Claire, I assume, will hand that to us. So we'll be given, Reese has got them. We'll be given the time to consider those and read them, and then we can ask any questions of Ian and Claire concerning those documents. And then, you know, we will make a decision at that point once we've had the opportunity to consider them. Yes, councillor Kilbane.
Can we just make it clear to the public watching that this is the first time all of the councillors will have seen these documents, and that we've not been instructed by anybody to destroy our mobile phones or anything, or eat them or anything like that. And I'm not sure where that misinformation is coming from.
Yes, yeah.
But I'll find out when off the top.
Can we just move forward, please? Come on, let's have some structure here. Can we agree to go into private session, please? Can I see those in favour? Thank you.
Okay, again, I'd like to confer with Andrew after reading the report. Given there's two officers here and there's probably an empty meeting room next door, we're going to shut down the webcasting. We're going to read the document. One of you is more than welcome to join us. And then I want to talk to Andrew about it. I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
Can I ask if that is a possible approach, please? Thank you.
We probably can facilitate that. Yeah.
If we decide that that's appropriate, councillor Lomas.
I think in line with you know, the principles of the being as open and transparent as we possibly can be when dealing with sensitive information, I think that questions that are asked should be asked within the committee, and that discussion should be within the committee. I think that it's important that while we maintain the ultra confidentiality of this very sensitive information, that we should still have the discussions and ask the questions within the committee group. You know, I don't understand the need for you to be in a different room to read something. I'm just not seeing the requirement for that.
Councillor Kilbane.
Just to add to that, really, this isn't a party political matter. This is not an issue for point scoring. This is something that we are trying to do collectively for the good of the council. And actually what we also need to have at the fore of our minds is that this is about people's lives here. You know, we need to make it clear and as open a decision as we can for the good of everybody involved, and sort of secret meetings to think about how we can score a few points would not be really appropriate.
It's just to highlight that the information you get, I think the best way would be that we do actually explain what it is. That information is not about making a decision tonight either. It is background information which relates to a further decision that you may need to make at some point in the future. I think the best way when we do go into private is for us to actually talk you through the document. It's not a document where you need hours to digest it. And certainly we would not be facilitating a situation whereby you go into another room and ask questions of officers at that point in time. So whilst if it's absolute request, clearly we can facilitate that. I don't think it's normal. I don't think it's even needed.
Thank you, Ian. So I'd like to propose then,
We go into private session. Do you want to just clarify the urgent business? And then we can close the web without coming back into it.
what we will do is we'll go into private session, we'll review the paper, and Claire and Ian will introduce it to us. There will be questions on that paper, and then once we have reviewed that and feel able, we will come back into public session so that the recommendations that are on page 9, I think, can be considered in public, and so then the public will also know what our decisions have been, and then we will consider if there's any urgent business. So that's the way that I propose that we move forward. Councillor Healy, is this relevant to my proposal there? Can you very quickly, please?
Very quickly. Councillor Lomas, I didn't ask to go into a separate room to read the document. I asked to go into a separate room, which the officers were happy with, to read and discuss it with my colleague, because I believe discussion does help. Councillor Kilbane, I don't believe at any point I have made a party or political point at all in any of my questioning. So if you could withdraw that statement, it would be most appreciated. And also, Councillor Kilbane, you must know I'm not massively party political. And I don't, well, we could, if I have made any party political points, if you can point them out to me, I'd most appreciate it. And I will apologise for it.
Councillor Kilbane.
So my accusation, which stands, is that the only reason I can see for you going into a private meeting is to have a conversation between the pair of you that might be to your political advantage rather than to the shared collective good of the council. I have no understanding as to why you would need to have a secret meeting when we're trying to come to a conclusion that is for the benefit of the entire council.
I
Councillor
would not
Lomas.
counter it.
Thank you,
Excuse
Chair.
me, Councillor
Thank you,
Healy.
Chair. Councillor Healy, I completely agree with you that it's important to discuss things so that we all understand them, but that has to include all members of the committee. That doesn't include, you know, members of different political parties sitting in different rooms having separate discussions. That won't help understanding across the committee, will it? So what I'm suggesting is that I completely agree with you that it is really important that we discuss things so that we make sure we understand them and that we're making decisions with full understanding of the information, and that is best done in the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. Claire, would you like to say something?
Thank you. It's just a point to add, really, that the people that this is affecting are probably watching this as we speak. And that the information that you're going to see in the private paper is private for the reasons that you set out at the start as to why it's excluded from press and public. And I think it's just important to talk through when we have the opportunity to talk through that very short piece of information. It is one side that we need to talk through. I think it will become clear about what questions you may or might need to ask, given that we're very careful that we're not identifying individuals, and that's the purpose of having a private paper. So if we start to talk through that, I think that might become clearer.
Thank you, Claire. Right, okay, so proposal then to move into private session now, so we can consider the one-sided piece of paper that Claire has outlined. Can I see those in favour, please? Thank you. Right, okay, so please can we go into private session? Thank you. And we will be coming back. Right, thank you to those people who have waited patiently for us to come back. We've discussed the private papers that were all viewed by the committee members in the room together, and questions were asked that will inform and help to them in their decision making. So we move now on to consideration of the recommendations that are on page 9, paragraph 2. So they say that Staffing Matters and Urgency Committee is asked, point 1, to approve the new chief officer structure as set out within Appendix 2. 2, to approve specifically as part of the new structure the deletion of the following 5 posts. And they are listed. They're Director of Customer and Communities, Corporate Director of Place, Director of Economy, Regeneration and Housing, Director of Environment, Transport and Planning, and Chief Finance Officer, which is a Section 151 officer. And 3, to approve the creation of the following 4 posts: the Director of Transport and Environment, Director of City Development, Director of Housing and Community Services, and Director of Finance, Section 151 officer. And just on those roles, given the conversation we had earlier around the placement of planning, either with the Director of Transport and Environment and Director of City Development, given the strategic nature of Director of City Development and the importance of those roles around combined authority, approval and implementation of the local plan, delivery of York Central and other major projects, regeneration and strategic city development, I'd like to propose that we move the planning function into Director of Transport and Environment, given that that is a regulatory and operational role, and separating out any chance for any conflict of interest there. So I would like to add that within the recommendations 3, that Director of Transport and Environment planning is included in there, and the current structure of Director of City Development, the job allocations, the role there, planning is taken out of that role. And then recommendation 4 is to agree to a chief officer appointment panel for any roles that require a form of assessment, and to note that council's management of change processes will be followed to determine appointments to the revised structure and new roles. 5, to note the potential financial implications of potential redundancies, including redundancy and pension strain, where relevant, as set out in the confidential annex, and note that any final redundancy payments will require further approval by this committee. 6, to note the revenue saving from the proposals relating to director roles of £165,000 prior to the consideration of any redundancy costs. And 7, to note that any redundancy costs will purely be those which arise due to terms and conditions of employment, these being the entitlement to redundancy in accordance with the council's redundancy scheme, together with any entitlement to pension that may arise from a redundancy on grounds of efficiency. Right, can I see those who are in favour of those recommendations, please? Yes, Councillor Healy.
I believe at the very start, you said that we couldn't start modifying this, and we've now moved a function from one directorate to another directorate.
I don't think I said you can't modify it. This is a decision for this committee to make. My job is to bring a report to you. You need to either accept the recommendations as I set out, or make amendments, which is the same as any decision-making body.
Yeah, and Ian did point out that it was for a member decision, given the feedback that he had received during the process, that the planning function could sit within either role. So hence my proposal. Councillor Lomas?
Yeah, I wrote it down as Ian said it, and he said members need to take a view. Because there are two viewpoints and the views are balanced. As to which, and Councillor Kilbane asked a question about it, which was answered. So we have covered it. But I did note that Ian had specifically said members need to take a view on where planning sits because of that.
Thank you. Right, okay.
You need to move second and then vote on each.
Okay, thank you, Reese. Right, can I move the proposal for putting the planning role into the Director of Transport and Environment and removing from the Director of City Development? Please can I have a seconder for that? So Councillor Corbane is seconding. And can I see a vote on that, those in favour of that? So that's 3 members in favour, those against, 2 members against. Thank you. So that proposal is moved and passed. Right, can we go back to the recommendations then? Can I see those in favour of the recommendations as amended? It's 3 members in favour of the recommendations. I see those against and abstaining. So 2 abstentions. Thank you for that. Right, thank you, everybody. So the final agenda item then is urgent business. I've not been informed of any urgent business. So that is the end of the meeting. Thank you for your attendance and patience, and have a good evening.